Good evening to all of Who Dat Nation and a special happy Wednesday to our Bayou Blitz family. I hope all of you are doing well out there. Hey, there's football in the air, almost for real. As we actually have a kind of game to talk about, and preview for you tonight. Having said that, I am Bob Rose. I am one of your co-hosts to your Bayou Blitz podcast. Joining me is my partner in crime, and it appears as if we're actually both at home base tonight. But I'm happy to be joined by my friend and my partner, Brendan Boylan. Brendan, happy Wednesday.
Yeah, happy Wednesday. I can confirm I won't be at home next week, so we might as well get it in while we can. I wanted to say happy belated to you. Birthday, happy belated anniversary to you as well. So lots of celebratory things going on. I do want to bring this.
Happy early birthday to Lauren. Happy early sobriety date to me. See, our strategy was we want to pack everything as close as we can, so that way there's less to remember during the course of the year.
Remembering things is hard. I mean, listen. In all honesty, it was an accident, but I joked with Katie. So also thank you guys for all the well wishes.
Congratulations to you and Katie.
I appreciate that. So we started dating on Pi Day because it's easy to remember. And then we got engaged on Ocho Cinco. So I was like, those are really easy things to remember. At least Ocho Cinco is for me because Chad Johnson, but maybe not for her. Anyway, I do want to talk about this before we get too started. If you guys have not seen in the Bayou Blitz Facebook group or the Bayou Blitz Twitter, go ahead and head over there now while you're watching on your laptop or your iPhone or tablet or however you're watching. Bob and I are giving away two of these. Drawing is going to be next week. We're going to just randomly do it. I think on Twitter, all you got to do is retweet and comment your favorite current saint. And if you're in the Bayou Blitz Facebook group, all you got to do is comment your favorite saint. We're going to pick two winners. Bob and I are going to handwrite and sign these on air to whoever gets selected. So, for the sake of an example, Jerry, if you win the football, I'm going to sit here and write one to Jerry. Thanks for your support. We're going to ship it out to you. And for those of you who are in the New Orleans area, you can go to training camp, and we'd love to see you guys show off what autographs you get at training camp as well. So these are going to be some really cool giveaways next week. So again, head to Twitter, head to the Facebook group if you haven't already. And we're excited to give these out. It's our second giveaway, right, Bob? We gave away a Drew Brees Funko sometime last year. We're giving these footballs away before the season. And then obviously we're going to do some giveaways during the season as well. But with all that said, Bob, we actually have news this week. I mean, it's funny because you read the bottom there. Injuries, obviously. A lot of guys banged up, a couple season-ending injuries, which we'll get to. But the almost signings, I think, is the more fun part of that because it shows a lot of things. And one of them has always been this. You and I have covered this team through podcasts for now 7 or 8 seasons, right? We both covered the team writing for Sports Illustrated. I think with my time there, it was like 3.5 or 4 years. And one thing that was always just drilled into us through Sports Illustrated themselves, Fan Nation, when that deal came through, and then Kyle T. Mosley as well, is guys, we have to be so sure when we put things out, right? You don't want to falsify information, right? You don't want to spread fake news because that's a common term in today's world. So I guess we'll start with the almost signings. With all that said, we have been taught so much to be careful of who your sources are, who you trust, what's being reported. And sometimes even holding off when we've heard certain things from people that we do trust.
Yeah.
But holding off until someone of national credibility got it. There have been times we have beat everyone to the punch. But we wanted to be so sure that we didn't put something out until later. Right? And there's a couple examples that come to my mind, and we're not here to sit here and brag, oh, we got this news first. But all that to be said, you have to be really, really sure when you put something out. And unfortunately for one of my former employers, they weren't so careful, right? So if you guys have missed it, the report was that Anthony Barr, the former Vikings linebacker, and Kareem Hunt, the former Chiefs and Browns running back, visited with the New Orleans Saints earlier this week. And it was reported that both were expected to sign. Now, before we get any further, you could very easily say, well, Brendan, they did say expected to sign. That's not a guarantee. Yes. But has there ever been a time in your life where you have seen a report from whether it be Adam Schefter, if you're football, Adrian Wojciechowski, if you're basketball, where they say expected to sign and it doesn't happen? Of course not. It just essentially means it's a done deal. They're just waiting for the ink to dry. Well, ESPN reports that both of those guys are expected to sign with the New Orleans Saints, which I'm reading this and I'm going, you know what? I was excited to talk about Wednesday. I was really excited because I was like, Anthony Barr, we get some linebacker depth. Mickey Loomis is finally listening to us. This is great. I was really excited. And then Kareem Hunt, say what you will. And obviously he has a past and things that are in his past that I could never support ever. But in terms of on the field skill sets and what he could bring to an organization, even though he has declined since that breakout rookie season in Kansas City, I thought he was a good fit, especially because Benjamin's out for the season. And if I did not get engaged that day, that was going to be a really tough day for me to get through when I saw that Benjamin tore his Achilles, because I was driving that train for almost a calendar year. I'm just kidding. But in all seriousness, I thought both made a lot of sense. Both were going to be great signings. And then it's like, 2-3 hours later after that report, where it's like, well, both guys walked out of the facility without a contract. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, we went from these guys were signing a contract later that day to both, walking out without contracts. Now, Kareem Hunt did go visit the Indianapolis Colts. He also walked away without a contract there. And Barr had a visit, I believe, in New York, and also walked away without a contract, which tells me maybe these guys are just really exploring every option that they have. But to get that type of a report to be completely let down, and these aren't huge name signings, Bob. These aren't, franchise-altering players. But certainly guys where if the Saints were to go on a run and go and make some noise in the playoffs, where you could probably go back into this time of year and say, well, those ended up paying off to being really good signings for depth, or those guys made really key plays throughout the season, or so-and-so had to step up when so-and-so was hurt, or so-and-so was suspended. So to walk away with nothing, it was, it was like sitting there and dangling a dog treat to your dog and then not giving it to him. It kind of stunk for Saints fans. But Bob, what'd you make of the almost signings of the week?
Listen, I'm still angry. And you kept using ESPN in general terms, and I understand why. I'm
Bob's
not
a step further. Let's go, angry Bob.
I wouldn't be Bob if I didn't. I'll throw the name under the bus because my damn name was attached to these too. Diana Rossini of ESPN, one of my new arch nemesis. She was the one that reported very specifically that the Saints are expected to sign Kareem Hunt and Anthony Barr pending the results of physicals. I ran with it. As a matter of fact, I think we were one of the, if not the first local channel to publish both of these reports. And like you said, Brendan, we were taught. We cited our sources. I used the correct verbiage. Expected to sign, reported by Diana Rossini, et cetera, et cetera. And then, like you said, I went on the Jordy Haltberg show, a very good friend of both of ours, and a national, ESPN affiliate. So I hope this doesn't affect the Black and Gold report every Tuesday. And we openly talked about the additions of Hunt and Barr on there, and then to find out, I think within the hour after that, that none of that was ever true at all. They were just in for visits. They just run of the mill visits. So Rossini was the first one that not printed, but put out the false narrative. And I was very apologetic. I explained the mistake. I said that we fixed it. We updated our articles to reflect the actual happenings in the news. And a lot of you folks were very understanding. Some of you even private messaged me. The ones that didn't show public support. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't the Saints News Network's fault. We appreciate that, but we also hold ourselves to a higher standard. Because we hold ourselves to a higher standard, we have actually been not the first one to publish specific reports when we were the first to know about it. So, like I said, I have a new arch nemesis. As far as my feelings on the matter, like you said, Brendan, Kareem Hunt went to Indianapolis, left Indianapolis without a contract. Anthony Barr's visit with the Giants actually got canceled at the last minute. He didn't end up visiting with them at all. So, both of them are still kind of floating out there. Still possibilities for the Saints, certainly. Both of them are undoubtedly weighing or exploring other options, and that's their prerogative. I mean, this is their living. So who am I to say, to tell anybody else, hey, you shouldn't go out and get the most money that you could find or the best deal that you could find. So my problem, not with them, individually. My problem, again, is with Diana Rossini specifically and with ESPN in general. Sorry, Jordy Haltberg. I love you. I love your station. I hope you keep bringing me on Tuesdays, but I call a spade a spade. On the field, Kareem Hunt would be a terrific addition to the Saints. He's a power runner between the tackles, terrific receiver out of the backfield. Barr, Brendan and I, among others, have all offseason have worried openly about the Saints' lack of depth at linebacker. And now you have Demario Davis banged up a little bit with a soft tissue injury. Nothing serious, but we probably won't see Davis all preseason. Zach Bond, if anything, Zach has regressed, rather than develop further. DeMarco Jackson has looked really, really good, but no experience there. And Andrew Dowell, who had a terrific start to camp, is out for the year with a knee injury. So a guy like Anthony Barr to fill in as your third linebacker, or at least compete with DeMarco Jackson for that third spot, that'd be a terrific pickup. Anthony no longer has the wheels he once did at 31, going on 32, but he's still a heady, intelligent player, and still a lanky and fluid athlete with good awareness and coverage. So from the on-the-field standpoint, I would love to see Kareem Hunt and or Anthony Barr back. It's not going to be the end of the world if they don't get either, or only get one of the two. But certainly the Saints feel that those spots are still a need. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone out and brought these guys in for a visit and a potential contract offer in the first place.
Absolutely. And personally, I think there was a little bit of a national media overreaction, particularly at the running back spot. And trust me, I'm the guy that's told all of you that Benjamin could end up being a very valuable piece to the New Orleans Saints. I've been saying that to you guys for months. And while I do think it hurts that the Saints aren't going to have that, I mean, the Saints are still with Jamal Williams, led the league in touchdowns last year, Alvin Kamara, who, this season, barring something insane, is going to be the Saints' all-time leader in touchdowns. And then you get Kendre Miller, who you drafted in the third round. Like, there's still depth there. I know Kamara's going to miss 3 games. We'll get into that as well. But I don't see running back as like this huge position of need. I saw, Benjamin more as a luxury. Mm-hmm. It was a luxury to have another back on the roster that you could count on. if you really needed him to, and it allowed Kendre Miller to develop a little bit more. It wasn't throwing Kendre in a position where it's like, we really need you to contribute right out the gate. To where I look at linebacker and everything that you highlighted. I mean, if you guys have watched the show at all over the last, 6 months, you know that Bob and I have some serious concerns about depth at that position. And bring in a guy like Anthony Barr after, one of the guys I was really looking for the Saints to at least bring in was Miles Jack. He's off the market now.
Mm-hmm.
Anthony Barr, with the experience that he has, as good as he was during the prime of his career, like you alluded to, Bob, he's lost a step, but a lot of guys, once they hit 30, lose a step.
I wouldn't know. I haven't gotten there yet, but
right. Before we got on the air, I was like, Bob, right? 24 this year, right? Younger than me, right? Considering you have kids about that age, I don't know if the math really works out, but
yeah, the math doesn't math. But hey, the Marvel Cinematic Universe opened up the multiverse. So I figure we can we can do all kinds of time warps.
Right. Okay. We'll roll with that, Bob. That sounds good. But nonetheless, I think bringing Anthony Barr would be a bigger jolt to the team than Kareem Hunt. I still think it is a true possibility that both come back and both do sign contracts after they go on their little tour and trying to figure out where their next NFL home is. But I'm encouraged that the Saints brought a linebacker in. I hope that they're not putting all their eggs in one basket and they would consider hosting another linebacker or two. And same at the running back spot. It doesn't have to be a name like Kareem Hunt. It could be, anybody who has any little bit of NFL experience at this point. I don't really care.
I published a piece earlier in the day yesterday, outlining exactly such names at running back. I mentioned Benny Snell, good between the tackles guy. I mentioned J.D. McKissick, terrific receiver out of the backfield. A couple of players like Darrell Williams, former LSU running back, most recently with the Cardinals, had a couple of very good years with the Chiefs. Good receiver out of the backfield, pretty versatile third down back. And none of those guys are going to take snaps away from a guy like Kendre Miller or Jamal Williams. And they certainly play second fiddle to both those guys and Kamara once he returns. But they're guys who might be able to fill in on special teams and could play a specialized role in situational football for you, certainly while Kamara is out suspended.
I love me some Benny Snell. I know that's a guy who hasn't really found his footing in the league, but watching his tape at Kentucky was very fun. Very aggressive runner. Like I said, still hasn't found his NFL home, but I think at this point, he's 3 or 4 years into the league at this point. That's crazy. It's crazy when you look back at draft tape and you look back at like what you've said about players. You're like, they've been in the league for that long,
right?
I feel like I was watching their draft tape yesterday. But I think Benny Snell could definitely be a specialist, right? We don't see that as much at the running back position now. When you think running back specialist, you're thinking third down backs. You're thinking guys that can, catch the ball to the backfield. But I look at a guy like Benny Snell, I'm like, man, if you need 3 yards, like Benny Snell's a guy that could definitely get it for you. Now, the Saints do have that in Jamal Williams, but if you're looking at depth, which again, Saints are have luxury if they were to bring in another running back. Kendre Miller, I think you would lean a little bit more towards a Kamara-like than a Williams-like because you have the upside of him being able to catch the ball out of the backfield, though it wasn't fully on display at TCU, and you could plug Benny Snell in. I think what's more likely is they get a Kamara clone or a third down back like a McKissick, like you said, that has a proven ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. And that way you almost have like an eye for an eye if an injury were to happen. And you can just kind of plug and play that way. But like I said, running back, not as concerned about. Let's talk about some of the injuries. I talked about, obviously, my guy, Benjamin being out for the season. You referenced Demario Davis with a soft tissue injury. The thumbnail today, we used Rashid Shaheed, who has been banged up as well. There are some in the national media, including Bleacher Report today, who named the Saints a loser so far in camp, at least the Saints offense, because of some of the injuries they have picked up. They referenced Shaheed, they referenced Eno Benjamin. Are there any injuries right now, Bob, that you're hearing that people should have some serious concerns about? Or is everything really we're just going to be precautionary because it is the preseason?
Yeah, I think it's mostly the latter. That the Saints, the team, and the players, individual players, are just being cautious. I'm not even going to say overly cautious. I doubt we see Demario Davis during the preseason. I doubt we see Rashid Shaheed during the preseason. Good chance we may not see Andrus Peat, during the preseason, as well as a couple other players. You listen. Preseason games don't mean anything. Not in the standings. If you're an athlete at any level, then you know that all preseason exhibition contests they mean something because there's so much that you could take away from it. And you can develop certain aspects of your team and your individual game. So you're never going to say meaningless from that aspect, but meaningless in the win and loss column. So having said that, you'd be absolutely insane to push these guys before they're 100% recovered and ready to go. And that's why the Saints actually did sign a player yesterday, and they brought back blocking tight end JP Holtz. And when I published that piece, tons of people were saying, why do they need another tight end? That's what 6, 7 tight ends. Yeah, but Lucas Krull is hurt. Jesse James is hurt. They're not going to rush those guys back. And you could counter, and people did counter with, those guys were long shots to make the team anyway, as is Holtz. Yeah, maybe. But we've seen long shots make the team and be heavy contributors in the past, A. And B, with Jesse James, Lucas Krull out, you're telling me you want Jimmy Graham, Foster Moreau, Jawan Johnson to carry a heavy amount of reps during the preseason games when they could increase the chance of injury? Hell no. So yeah, again, these different signings, you're going to see the same, the quote unquote camp body term that Brendan and I hate. Those guys fill a role. If nothing else, then to keep your starters or first and second teamers to limit their reps to decrease the chances of injury. So no, I mean, and we've heard Dennis Allen already say that a lot of the starters are going to play at least a couple of series against the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday. While I think that's a good move, if anybody is in the least bit nicked up at all, you're not going to see them. So yeah, I can't say that I'm overly concerned about injuries to Shaheed, Davis, any of the other ones. I would be more concerned if they concealed it or tried to rush these guys back, risking more potentially long-term effects for injuries.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that is a little it's a little bit of a toss-up depending on who you ask when it comes to should you play your starters in the very first preseason game. And a lot of people, analyst-wise and fan-wise, when Dennis Allen said that, there's a lot of people that were in full support of it. I'm one of those people that are in support of giving them at least a series, simply because this is a brand new offense with a brand new quarterback. And Kamara's going to be suspended for 3 weeks. So what does that mean? You have a brand new starting running back. There's a lot of new pieces here, critical pieces. The offensive line for the most is the same. The receivers for the most part, 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 if it's Traquan. Like those guys have been in the system long enough. But when you have a new quarterback, you can kind of take everything I just said and go,
yeah,
right? Because he's got to get adjusted to it as well. So I'm all for seeing some of those guys. I know there are some people that are not. I'm with you, Bob. If anybody's just even a little hurt, don't let them play. There's no need to. You want a prime example? Even a guy who hasn't really shown up on the injury report so far in camp is like Mike Thomas should not play a down, in my opinion. If he's showing good progress in camp, no need to risk the injury. Rashid Shaheed, no need to see him this preseason. Who else am I thinking of that's just got a little thing there? Andrus Pete, shouldn't see. And the list goes on, right? Kendre Miller, I know, had been battling some stuff. Probably won't see him either, which is another reason the Saints need to sign a running back.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's just a guy to give an opportunity, take a flyer on and see if he really impresses you. That's why the Saints need a running back. I'm all for all of that. But we also, as fans, should not overreact to not seeing people, because you have to keep in the back of your mind, okay, it's, they're a little banged up. There's no need to risk it. Let's not overreact. All of those things, right? Those are the important things to remember as we go into the first week of the preseason, and we will get to that in a little bit. I don't want to gloss over it because we've referenced it a few times with Alvin Kamara. Last week, Kamara had just had a meeting with Goodell. We were throwing some numbers, what we thought it was going to be. I said I was going to be shocked if it was under 4 games.
Yep.
I was shocked. Kamara only gets 3 games. I don't even think there's going to be an appeal. I think Kamara's, and we kind of talked about that last week too. There's no need to appeal if you've already met with the commissioner.
Right.
At that point, it is what it is. So I was shocked Kamara only got 3 games. Definitely a win for the Saints.
Mm-hmm.
That they're only going to miss him for 3 games. Definitely a win for Kamara, who's looking to have a bounce back season. Bob, what was your take on the 3-game suspension? How do you think the Saints navigate that 3-game suspension, especially after losing Eno Benjamin? And is it almost a blessing in disguise to get some early serious reps for a new face in Jamal Williams and a new face in Kendre Miller?
First, I was shocked it was only 3 games. Like you, I've been on record all offseason saying that I expected 6. And I was hoping for an appeal down to 4, if Goodell forgot who Kamara played for, maybe even 3 games. So I absolutely think it's great news for the Saints and Kamara both. Now that means, and I, like you, Brendan, I don't think that I'd be equally shocked if Kamara appealed the 3-game suspension. I think his appeal was when he met with the commissioner ahead of the official suspension announcement, and maybe getting ahead of it like he did help a little bit. I didn't think that it would, because again, I know who Alvin Kamara plays for. Corrupt Commissioner Roger Goodell knows who Alvin Kamara plays for. So I think 3 games is not only great news, but like you said, also a blessing. Because during the 3 games that Alvin Kamara will miss will be at home against the Titans, on the road against the Carolina Panthers, and against the Green Bay Packers in Week 3. I'm pretty sure, right? So I mean, those are 3 solid defenses, but when a player is going to get suspended, my philosophy is always, let's treat it like a Band-Aid and just rip this thing right off. Get that wound opened. And as a result, you can hit the ground running for no pun intended. And you could start on your game plans, even if you don't reveal them in the preseason, but you could start on your game plans that revolve around Jamal Williams and Kendre Miller into the backfield. We'll still see Kamara during the preseason. He's allowed to participate in preseason games, training camp practices, the inter squad scrimmages that we'll see in the next couple of weeks with the Chargers and Texans. Kamara won't have to step away from the team officially to begin his suspension until after cuts on August 29th. At that time, Alvin Kamara's roster spot is the Saints will be given a roster exemption for Alvin Kamara's roster spot. In other words, Kamara will not count against the 53-man roster for the regular season for those first 3 games. Which again leads me to believe that the team will probably continue to kick the tires on other veteran free agent running backs if they don't circle back around to Kareem Hunt. It's not that they don't feel comfortable with Jamal Williams and Kendre Miller. They do. In fact, they prepared for this contingency plan of Kamara getting suspended, not to mention adding much needed backfield depth just by the addition of Williams and Miller in the first place. However, the loss of Eno Benjamin, I don't think it's being talked about enough. Not that Eno was going to be any star for this offense, but he could have played a role in situational football. Would have been a special teams contributor. If you're going to look at the bright side of this, Kirk Merritt, wide receiver last year, has been moved pretty much exclusively to running back. And although he's been dinged up too, dealing with a hamstring, if I'm not mistaken, he came back to practice today. So, with the loss of Eno Benjamin, even if they had signed Kareem Hunt, yesterday or today, we still probably would have seen a heavy dose of Merritt if he's healthy, and Merriweather, the undrafted running back from UMass. We'll see what they have to do, or what they can do. Certainly over the second half of this upcoming game against Kansas City. But again, now that you know when Kamara is going to be suspended and the length of the suspension, if you're Pete Carmichael and those offensive coaches, you can now get a head start on your game plan, knowing that you have Jamal Williams and Kendre Miller, but not Alvin Kamara.
Do you think there's any chance the Saints go into week 1 of the preseason without signing a running back, getting a feel for where Merritt and Merriweather may be before ultimately making a decision to bring in a vet?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I think that's absolutely what's going to happen now. If Hunt would have signed, say, yesterday or today, there still would have been a chance that he suited up this weekend. Now that he hasn't, even if he signs tomorrow, or they sign another back tomorrow or Friday, you're only talking a couple of days of work before your game against Kansas City on Sunday. So at this point, unless the Saints feel that I have to sign Kareem Hunt or insert player's name here, I have to give this guy a contract offer before another team swoops in and get him. I don't think there's any urgency now. Because you're not going to have whoever you may sign ready for Sunday's game, so you're going to have to use Merriweather. You're going to have to use Merritt if he's healthy enough to go. So you're at least going to get a look-see at what you have with these guys. And listen, the Saints may not feel the urgency to sign a running back at all. They'll continue visiting with them, exploring the options. They could just sit back and say, you know what? Like they're doing with linebackers, let's run with Merriweather. Let's run with Merritt. Let's see what they can give us. Maybe we have a diamond in the rough. If we don't, there are other teams that are going to be cutting running backs, perhaps younger running backs, at the August 29th cut down day. At that point, if we still feel it's a need, they could swoop in then and grab a guy, poach a guy off a practice squad or whatever the case may be.
Or go to a familiar face if a familiar face gets cut. We've seen the Saints do that many times over the years, waiting till cut day, bringing in a familiar face. They're a little bit of ahead of the curve that way, and you feel a little more comfortable going into week 1. Right off the top of my head, there's not a lot of running backs from over the years that they could go pick up the phone for. I don't think Latavius Murray's getting cut from Buffalo, especially after how well he performed in New Orleans last year, after having to call a familiar friend, and then out in Denver as well. Bob, let's talk a little bit about the first preseason game. We actually get to talk about a game for the first time in a long time. I want to start here. I mean, we've talked a little bit about the starters playing. We talked a little bit about, guys who are banged up, or even if it's just a little thing, them not playing. I want to discuss one topic with you that there's a name that hasn't been talked about a whole lot this preseason and in the training camp. Rightfully so. He's third on the depth chart in his position. But I think it's an appropriate time to talk about Jake Haener. Backup quarterbacks get a lot of time in the preseason. That's when they really get their chance to either shine or, to just be polite, not shine. I look at Jake, and it's an interesting thing because he's got an opportunity to be a backup for a few years, and depending on how Derek Carr does over the next couple years, could eventually, do the Aaron Rodgers, the Jordan Love thing for more, recency, and end up being the starting quarterback down the line. But the Saints have an interesting spot with a guy named Jameis Winston. Now, if you guys have watched the show, Bob and I love some Jameis Winston. Very likable, very, very easy to root for type of guy. He's not going to be the starting quarterback, but as some of these preseason games continue, what's going to happen, Bob? Quarterbacks are going to get hurt. Jameis Winston might be, at least I would throw his name in the hat, as being one of, if not the best backup quarterback in the NFL right now. If you're the Saints, who would you give majority of the snaps to in week 1? Is it going to be Jameis Winston? So there's recent tape if you need to, dangle him around as trade bait. Or are you giving it to Jake Haener to see where this rookie quarterback out of Fresno State really is?
Boy, and this isn't a knock on Jameis Winston. As a matter of fact, just the opposite. I think if I were the coach, I think I would be tempted to give the lion's share of the snaps to Jake Haener. And the reason is it's a double pronged reason. What you have in Jameis. Granted, there's some new weapons that you brought in this offseason, but it's essentially the same system with the same offensive coordinator, with probably many of the same audible calls. Jake Haener's a newbie, a new face. Relative unknown, certainly unknown to the NFL game. And I don't want to keep saying this over and over, and giving the impression that I think these veterans should be wrapped in bubble wrap and not allowed to play in the preseason at all. But I also can't state it enough that the more your veterans, the more your first and second teamers are out there in a game where a win or a loss doesn't matter, the more you risk injury. When you have a known commodity, and assuming Jameis Winston is in shape, not assuming, we know Jameis Winston is in shape, you know what you have with him. So I don't know that I want to, and the rest of the NFL knows what Jameis Winston is too, by the way. So I would want to get as much work for my rookie as I possibly can, because in the grand scheme, and I know, Brendan, you and I both mentioned it as possibilities earlier in camp about, hey, you know what? What if they decide to trade Jameis Winston, and get maybe an early day 3 or a late day 2 pick out of it, conditional, obviously. I don't think that that's possible now. It's certainly possible, but I think it's rather improbable now, especially now that Teddy Bridgewater has signed with Detroit, because you don't want to go into the regular season with a rookie 4th round draft choice as your second string quarterback necessarily. No matter how impressive Jake Haener is, I like the fact that you decided to have an experienced backup, not only experienced in the NFL, but experienced in your system. That can't be overstated enough either, when you brought Derek Carr in. So again, it's not a knock on Jameis Winston, and I'm not saying I wouldn't play him at all this Sunday. I think I'd give a series to Derek Carr and a series or 2 to Jameis Winston, and then Jake Haener's getting the rest of the snaps that night.
I'm with you on that. And I'm glad you brought up that point about Teddy Bridgewater, because if Jameis was to be moved, and I'm with you as well, at this point, I don't think he will be, regardless of if there's a team that has a big name quarterback go down. It was nice to think, okay, well, if we move Jameis, there's and we just talked about familiar faces. There's a familiar face we can go pick up, a guy very much like Jameis. Teddy's going to be like New Orleans Saints folklore. It doesn't matter. Like those 5 games, even though he didn't put up fantastic stats, the fact that Teddy Bridgewater stepped in for the greatest player in franchise history, and went 5-0. I mean, it would have been. You want to talk about like signed, sealed, delivered. If the Saints would have won the whole thing that year, Drew retires, Teddy takes the reins as the starter moving forward. I mean, you want to talk about like storybook, that would have been it. But nonetheless, he's still a part of folklore forever. Like Teddy's going to be beloved by New Orleans. That would have been easy to do. Teddy's off the market now. So if you're to trade Jameis, is there anyone out there that has any experience in the system that you'd feel comfortable bringing back? And I mean, the answer is no, because the only one that comes to mind, and he didn't have a great year and a half in New Orleans. I think that was all Ian Book had in New Orleans, right? A year and some change, year in a off season. Even if he were to be cut by Philly, which I don't think he will be, is there enough of that one NFL start on Monday Night Football against Miami to be like, yeah, I feel really comfortable bringing this guy back to be the backup quarterback?
Just the opposite.
Exactly. And honestly, I still hope the best for Ian Book.
Yeah.
I hate that it didn't work out here, but I hope the best, and he'll be a career backup, and that's what I thought he was when he was, coming out of Notre Dame as well.
Mm-hmm.
But nonetheless, there is no option there. So, it's interesting because Dennis didn't say we're going to give the starters a series.
Right.
Starters are going to play. Like, well, what the hell does that mean? Like, you're going to play them a whole quarter? Like, I would expect. I'm actually going to go out on a limb here. I expect the offense to get 2 series.
Mm-hmm.
Not one. I expect the starters with Derek Carr to get 2 series. Unless the first one goes for a touchdown and it's like a flawless first drive, which I'm not expecting that. I expect 2 series. Then I'd expect Jameis to get 2 series. Or depending on how time of possession is and the clock, maybe Derek gets the first quarter, maybe Jameis gets the second quarter, Jake gets the second half.
Mm-hmm.
That could be a possibility as well. I don't know. But I think ultimately you're right. Like Jake Hayner's going to get majority of it. But I also wouldn't discount the fact that I think Derek Carr's going to get more in a series. The other thing with Jameis, I'm only going to say this because ultimately I like talking about Jameis Winston. I don't think he got a fair deal. Injuries are a part of the game. Injuries aren't fair. Life's not fair. He didn't get a fair deal in New Orleans as the starter. But just listening to him talk about the team, his coaching staff, the city, his relationship with Derek Carr, and what his job is this season, damn, it's hard to trade a guy like that.
Yeah.
That is like so bought in to not just himself, but the team and getting to a Super Bowl, and let me help Derek Carr where I can with the experience that I have. Like, I saw a meme the other day, and it was like, when my team lands the number 1 pick, and it was like a stone face. And it was like, my team when they win the Super Bowl, and it was a stone face. And it was my team when they trade my favorite role player. And it was like in tears. Like, that's how I'd feel about Jameis. Like, Jameis isn't going to, if there's no injury to Derek Carr, like, Jameis isn't going to be a make or break or really have that much of an immediate on-field impact this season. But locker room guys are so important. And Bob and I have talked about this a lot over the years. What made the Saints so special from 17 to 20? The 4-year stretch. Everybody said, well, they had a good core, right? They had Mike Thomas and Drew Brees and Alvin Kamara. And we always said, we'll go a step further and said they had the best locker room culture in the NFL. Mm-hmm. It's hard to trade a guy that is all about the team, is a true locker room culture guy. Everybody loves Jameis Winston, especially some of the responses you get to the media. But everybody loves Jameis, and I think it would be extremely hard to trade him at this point. But that's enough about Jameis. We'll move forward. What are you looking for defensively in this game, right? The defense has really stood out in camp so far. I believe it was Ross who actually went out and said, and if it wasn't Ross, I'm sorry for putting words in your mouth. There's a lot of people that you got to keep up with this time of year. There's a report that Marshawn Lattimore is having the best camp maybe he's ever had. You mentioned the injury to Demario Davis. Peyton Turner, it's slowed down a little bit. But for that first week, it was like, who is this guy? where has he been for the last 2 years, right? So ultimately, defensively, Bob, who are you looking at? The starters might only get a series or two. We already highlighted linebacker, and I think DeMarco Jackson's an easy pick here.
Yeah.
It can translate from the camp to on field. But who are you looking at, or what positions are you looking at to highlight for the people watching at home in week 1?
I'm looking at 2 positions defensively. First of all, obviously, not only Marshawn Lattimore, but Alontae Taylor are both having terrific camps. We mentioned DeMarco Jackson, so I'm going to be watching him really, really closely. But the two positions that I'm watching, are safety and defensive tackle. Defensive tackle. No disrespect to Peyton Turner, because I agree with you. We're hearing that maybe that light is finally coming on. And just like with DeMarco Jackson, I'm going to be watching Peyton Turner to see if that continues. But with today's NFL, you don't see a lot of physical. In fact, you see barely any physical contact at all, especially in the trenches during training camp. This is a defensive tackle position that was completely revamped. And rebuilt pretty much from scratch this offseason. You brought in two free agents that are going to get starters reps, and you spent your first round draft choice all on a defensive tackle. So I'm going to be very interested to see what that position does against a Kansas City offense that we're probably not going to see their starters, probably at all, to be honest with you. But I need to see that position create a little bit of disruption. Safety. Marcus May coming off a disappointing injury plagued campaign, but more so than that. Tyrann Mathieu was trending upward, and had a strong finish to the year. But this is a position I still don't feel real confident in its depth. I like Smoke Monday. I like Lonnie Johnson. Jordan Howden has had some moments, the rookie 5th round pick. I need to see those guys do it in game action, though. And I need to see it more than a couple of games. Because, again, this is not a position that I still feel real confident about depth. So, the individual players that we mentioned aside, I'm going to be watching very specifically deep into the game at safety and defensive tackle.
I think safety for the Saints is almost like wide receiver, the joke that I made probably a month ago on the show, where it was you get past your starters, your 3, and you get to 4, and you go, oh, that's a guy that would be a really nice guy to be my last receiver on the roster. Then you do that a couple times, and you realize that's the rest of the depth chart. And I think it's that way for safety as well. You go, oh, that guy wouldn't be a bad, if I have to throw him in a game type of a safety. And then you're like, oh, that's the whole.
That's right.
And with that said, I mean, they're NFL caliber players.
Sure.
It's one of those, if someone were to go down, you're like, do I really want them in position for? I'm a little bit higher on Tyrann Mathieu having a full bounce back season. I think he ordered that really well. I think he had a really strong back half of the season. After being a guy that was being somewhat crucified by local media after the first half, Bob included, I was disappointed. I think a lot of people were. But then you started to see the honey badger again. It was great. It was great to see because that's what you expected when you signed in New Orleans. So I'm high on that. I think Marcus May, and again, I don't know if I ever actually checked this or if I'm just, a little too tired to, remember. I don't think Marcus May played back-to-back games last season. I've said that for 6 months. I never actually looked it up. I don't know if he really did. He didn't have a bad campaign. I don't think he had a good campaign either. He certainly didn't have a campaign that lived up to the second best safety in the free agency class behind Marcus Williams, right?
No.
Not live up to that at all. He was okay, it was fine. Didn't live up to the hype. We'll see what happens this year. Remember, he still got, we talked about Kamara in the suspension. He's still got stuff dealing. He's got to deal
Exactly.
with too. And it will probably conveniently happen in the middle of the season, because that's usually how it works.
Yeah.
For me, I'll take the offensive side of the ball because we don't have too much time left this evening. We kind of highlighted it already. I think it's really easy to point towards like quarterback because we talked about Jake Haener. I'm more interested in the third and the fourth quarter of these games, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, I'm paying attention to see if the starters get some sort of rhythm. But I'm gonna pick running back. I want to, if Kendre Miller plays, I want to see what Kendre Miller, is. And then the other two running backs we mentioned. You guys gonna make enough plays to warrant the Saints not going and signing a veteran running back? And the Saints have been historically very good at free agent running backs over the years.
Yeah.
Or late round draft pick running backs over the years. I mean, obviously Pierre Thomas, one of the greatest undrafted running backs ever. You get a guy like that was drafted, but Boston Scott has had a really good career. That was a Saints draft pick. Chris Ivory, and the list goes on. I mean, the Saints have done really well in that spot.
Yeah, Tyree Robinson, even, and there's a lot of haters out there, but Travaris Cadet had some nice moments at a third down back. Marcus Murphy was a solid kick returner. Can Ellis Mayweather at least show that kind of potential? Brendan, I want to ask you, and you can count it as my daughter drop if you want. I know what I would do with him. But we talked about the starters, the healthy starters only seeing a series or two. I think that if I were the coach, I would leave Trevor Penning in for longer, for longer series. Maybe even as much as a whole half, regardless of who else is around him. And I know the risk of injury. I myself just got done saying it, but Penning. One of the other worries about him, other than the injuries, the other worry is how quickly is he going to develop as a pass protector, and that's the reason I would leave him in for at least a half. Is because the only way you develop as a in pass protection is by repetitions and reps. Well, you can't get reps if you're on the sidelines. So that's why I would leave him in for a whole half. What would you do with Trevor Penning?
I'll dot that. And I think more of it is because he didn't get it last year. Right. And
yeah,
I think that's a little undervalued. I'm going to make the basketball comparison, as I like to do a lot. There's a lot of guys who will miss their rookie offseason and then get sent back to summer league the next year. And people go, why? So, well, they missed it last year. They missed very important reps last year. Regardless of when they came back in the season, how they played during the year, getting a true full offseason is really important, regardless of where you are in your journey of, transition from college to the pros. So I'm with you on that. I think it's important that he gets reps. I know he's probably penciled in as the starter at this point, but it is extremely important that he gets reps because he only got a couple, was it 8 games last year? Maybe.
It's at 6.
6 games last year.
6 or 7, 1 start.
So it is important he gets some reps. So I'm all for that. My daughter drop to you before we close out the show is dot or drop one of the receivers not named Olave, Mike Thomas, Shaheed, because Shaheed probably won't play. But one of those other receivers will step up and have a big game week 1 to create some sort of gap in who's going to get those final roster spots. Drop.
I have zero confidence in that depth chart. And I still love A.T. Perry, and he's actually coming along nicely. I don't think he's at the point yet where he's going to make a whole lot of head turning plays during the preseason, during the preseason opener. I'm not saying it's not going to happen before the end of the preseason. Brian Edwards, James Washington, they've been absolutely invisible. Traquan Smith, he's Traquan Smith. Traquan Smith could have 10 catches for 110 yards and 3 touchdowns against Kansas City and go right back to being the usual Traquan Smith once the regular season starts. So I don't give a shit I don't care what I see from Traquan Smith during the preseason. I know what he is. All of you should know what he is. And the rest of that depth chart, I don't have any confidence in right now. So no, I'm going to drop. I don't see a receiver making a big enough impact for me to say, you know what, I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable with depth now.
And also remember, don't overreact to these games either. You want a prime example with receiver? And I still liked him, and I hope he does well with Sean out in Denver. Marquez Callaway had a heck of a preseason.
Yeah.
And didn't live up to it in the regular season. I think he's a good 4 or 5 receiver, but I think that's the ceiling for him. Receiver 4 or 5 in the NFL. And he's quality there. He's no slouch there. He's quality. But he had a really good preseason game, was against Jacksonville 2 years ago now. And it just did. There's plenty of preseason guys that just never work out. So just don't overreact to anything. Before we go, while we're talking about receiver, I do want to shout out Chris Olave, who is having a fantastic camp. Some of the national media and some other rival executives saying he is atop of their charts for breakout player in year 2. So quick shout out to Chris Olave. Quick shout out to the fact that we both said Olave was going to be Olave and Penning. I'm gonna take that one to my grave, Bob. We knocked out both first round picks that year. So yeah, but shout out Chris Olave. Bob, as we close out the show, we had some vacation time, the both of us. We had some fun. May or may not have forgot what day of the week it was for a little bit there. But we're back. We're back on its schedule. We're going to be back next Wednesday as well. Like I said, I'll be on the road. We're going to be giving away those footballs and whatnot. So people who want to get in on that giveaway and also follow you in your incredible work with the Saints News Network, where can they all follow you and the podcast?
Folks, and thank you for tuning in tonight. And as always, we love you for your support. You can follow me on Facebook, Bob Rose. I'm over on Twitter at BobbyR2613. All of our works, John Hendricks, Kyle Mosley, Ross Jackson, and obviously myself, we can all be followed at the Saints News Network or at Saints News on Twitter. And remember, we do the majority of the work for the SI.com team site. When you click on to New Orleans Saints, we do most of those articles, or at least contribute for them. So thank you for your support in that regard as well. And as always, if you do already find yourself as a member of the Bayou Blitz Facebook group and the Bayou Blitz Twitter page at Bayou Blitz Pod, thank you. And continue to funnel your friends, your family, other Saints fans. Suggest it. I see people all the time on Twitter, and Facebook too. Hey, what's a good podcast to listen to? I'm a New Orleans Saints fan. Folks, that's why you're family. That's why we say this is your show. That's when you that's when you chime in. Funnel people towards Brendan and I. I know I have a face better suited for radio than TV. So tell them they can, they could just, play it through the radio or whatever. But thank you for all the support that you have given Brendan and I so far. And please continue to do so. You've done a great job of taking ownership and making this your show. We are your proud mouthpieces for it.
Absolutely. For myself, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram and Threads at BT Boylan. Follow the podcast at Bayou Blitz Pod. Make sure you get on the Twitter giveaway for the White Panel Footballs. You can get in on the Facebook group giveaways, the Bayou Blitz Facebook group. We've already had plenty of interaction there, so definitely people are throwing their names in the hat. Make sure you remember to do that for yourself as well.
Yeah.
I hope next week is just as fun, just as busy, just as much news to talk about. And guess what? Next Wednesday, we get to break down like game film for the
Ow.
first time in months. I know it's preseason. People are going to be like, are you guys really going to sit there? Yes, we're going to talk about that play in the third quarter at 4:32, a 2-yard run by Kirk Merritt. We're going to be breaking down that tape because those are the important plays in the game. I'm telling you guys, if you guys are true diehard football people, you already know this. If not, this is going to, and you're more of a casual fan, that's fine. The third and the fourth quarter of the preseason games, a lot of people click off. That's when you want to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Because those are the kids that are fighting for their NFL lives. That's going to be more entertaining than any part of the game. I guarantee it. Now, the scoreboard might not reflect that, but in terms of getting 120% effort every single play from those guys, that's when you want to watch the game.
That's when guys like Terrell Davis, Shannon Sharp, Tom Brady, Marcus Colston, Lance Moore. That's the period of the preseason games where they really catch the coach's attention. Yeah, and you don't know what kind of diamond in the rough is going to develop and kind of show themselves out during what they call the garbage time of preseason games. So it's one of the reasons why I love doing this job, because as a casual fan, admittedly, it is tough, to watch the third and fourth quarters of a lot of preseason games. Now that we kind of have to do it, I relish in the role because I look at it through different eyes now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for guys like me who got to cover some of these guys in college, even if they don't end up making the final roster, to be able to look back and go, hey, I called games for that guy.
Mm-hmm.
That guy went to so-and-so university. Like, he's getting his shot. That's incredible. That's awesome. And being able to relate on more of a personable level and covering a lot of college kids over the years, those moments mean the world to them. So, we should relish in those moments as well for them. And hopefully, they make some noise. Last thing I wanted to do, because we didn't get to do it last week because we had the Hall of Fame game, was I did want to shout out TJ Luther, wide receiver from Gardner-Webb, who got some time with the New York Jets at receiver in that preseason game. TJ, man, doubt you're watching this because you're probably watching film and going over the playbook. Really rooting for you to make the team. You made Gardner-Webb proud, bringing us our first conference title in 2 decades. So congrats on getting to a point where you could ink an NFL contract. We hope you have a great preseason and continue doing your thing. Until next week, guys, Bob and I will have some breakdown of the Kansas City Chiefs and New Orleans Saints preseason week 1. We appreciate all of your support. Can't wait to see you guys next week. Until then, find some peace, spread love, practice positivity. Get in for this giveaway. We're excited about it. We'll see you next week.